Today we are making my favorite thing I've ever made. Spoiler, I'm wearing them right now. Buckle up, folks. We are making some DIY self-drafted trousers. They're somewhat fitted with a zipper in the back and pockets. For this tutorial, you don't need a store-bought pattern. I am just gonna start by tracing something that I already own. I just used these pants that fit me well to trace the basic shape of, and then I made some customizations. I changed the pleats a little bit. I did a zipper in the back instead of on the front. And this is actually my favorite way to pattern make. It's how my grandma taught me when I first learned how to sew, because it's free. So let's just get started. First, we're gonna head to the table and do a little pattern. We are starting with the front side of the pants. So I'm gonna fold them so the front side is facing up. I'm using the most professional Crayola markers. I'm gonna start by folding this waistband down because we're gonna make a waistband pattern piece later. And right now I just wanna trace the pants. So I'm kind of pulling on it to make sure it's nice and flat as I'm tracing. And I'm literally just going around and tracing the exact seam lines around these pants. And when I get to the bottom, I am gonna add some length because these kind of look like high waters on me. So I'm just gonna eyeball, add a few inches. We can perfect this in just a minute. Now I'm gonna add the pleat for the front. As you can see, I have 2 pleats here. So I'm just gonna roughly place this pleat somewhere in the middle and make it about 4 or 5 inches long. And now I'm just straightening my lines. I am kind of going with my heart, my instinct on this, straightening my waist and straightening the side seam. Okay, now let's cross-check our measurements. So grab your little measuring tape. We're gonna measure our waist. This is me reminding you to breathe while you take your measurements. My waist is 30 inches. Now we're gonna divide that by 4 because this pattern piece is half of your front, which means it's a fourth of your entire waist circumference. So 30 divided by 4 is 7.5. So I'm gonna cross-check this waist measurement and make sure it is 7.5 inches, which it was too big. This is why we always cross-check. I realized that it was indeed that first line that I drew. So I'm gonna correct this a little. So my waist is 7.5 inches wide. Okay, now we need to leave a little bit of extra room for this little dart pleat thing. And I know I want mine to be about 1 inch wide. So I'm gonna add 1/2 inch to each side of my waist measurement, 1/2 inch on that side and 1/2 inch on the other side. So now it's our waist divided by 4 plus 1 inch. Now I'm taking a different color marker and I'm gonna draw in my seam allowance. So this is easy. This is just 1/2 inch all around. And if you're thinking that line looks a little bit wonky, yes it is. I probably would have curved that a little more. I don't know what got into me. We will persevere. So I'm just adding 1/2 inch all around. And for the bottom hem, I'm going to add 1 inch. So first I'm gonna straighten my line and then add my inch hem. I'm gonna write an F for front and cut my pattern piece out. And for the back, you know the drill. We're gonna flip the pants so that the back side is facing up. Again, making it nice and flat so I can see my seams all around. I'm gonna avoid the waistband for now. When you get to the crotch part of the back side, you're gonna notice you have to pull this little guy out pretty far just to be able to see that full seam. So I'm just pulling that fabric out all the way until I'm tracing that seam exactly. And for the hem, I'm just drawing a little dotted line, but I'm gonna fix this in a second. So the back side of my pants also have some pleats. So I'm gonna go ahead and draw that in right now. And now I'm gonna cross-check. Remember our waist divided by 4, 7.5 for me. And it did not equal 7.5, so I'm gonna fix that now and straighten my lines. And then I'm giving myself room for that dart, so I'm gonna add another 1/2 inch on each side. So now it should be 8.5 inches. I'm gonna taper and blend that line all the way down. And now I'll add my 1/2 inch just like I did on the front, all around. Now I'm laying the front pattern piece down, and then I did something that was kind of weird. I slanted this little waist part on the back side of my pants. I don't actually think this was super crucial, but I did Google some basic pattern pieces for pants, and the back side is actually usually slanted a little bit. So I think I just did this second nature, but I still don't think that it was super necessary. But what is necessary is you want to make sure that the side seams are the same length because these will be sewn together eventually. You also want to make sure that the inseams are the same length on the front and the back. So I'm going to slide that over and make sure those are the same length. If they're not, you can adjust your lines. And I'm also making sure the hem is the same length on the front and the back side. Once that's done, we can cut our pattern piece out, and this will be for the back side of our pants. But wait, did we cross-check our hip measurement? I had a slight moment of panic and I thought, I hope this fits over my butt. So let's just take our hip measurement, which is the widest part of your hip, usually where your butt is. Mine is about 40 inches. And then I'm measuring down about roughly where my butt would be, and it's about 10 inches down from the waist. So I'm gonna measure down 10 inches. So this is roughly where the booty will be. And now I'm gonna cross-check that this is our hip measurement divided by 4. For me, this would be 10 inches. But wait, 10 inches would mean that these pants were skin tight. So I wanted these to be pretty dang fitted at the waist, but I don't want them to be super skin tight at the butt. I want to be able to walk around and move. So I would recommend adding about an inch, maybe an inch and a half to be safe. So for me, that would be 10 and a half or 11 inches, which as you can see, mine is not that wide. So I'm gonna do the classic tape a scrap piece of paper on so that I can adjust my lines, give myself a little bit more room in the booty, and cut it out. And last, I always double check my measurements by holding it up to myself. So I'm just pinching that dart in to get an idea of how wide these pants will be. And I'm just making sure the pants are gonna fit at the center front and the side seam, which it looks pretty good. It definitely looks like it will be a little bit tight, but I was going for fitted with this look. And the back side, this was worrisome. This was barely big enough, and I felt like I needed to add a little bit more around the hip booty part. So I added a little bit more on, and then I cut it out. That was horrible. We did it. And the last pattern piece we have to quickly draw is a pocket. So I'm just tracing my hand and I'm just eyeballing what a pocket typically looks like. Then I'm taking a ruler and I'm adding 1/2 inch seam allowance all around and cutting it out. And there's our pocket piece. All right, our pattern pieces are done. Now we can cut our fabric. I'm gonna lay my fabric out. My fabric is folded in half, right sides together. And first I'm making sure I have enough fabric, which I was so relieved to see that I did have enough fabric. And if you're wondering what's blurred out in the back, I had a pair of underwear drying on my doorknob because I don't like to put my undies in the dryer. So that's not something I want on YouTube. I'm gonna cut 2 pieces for the front of my pants, and I'm doing the same thing for the back of the pants. And if you're using plaid or striped fabric, it's always good to make extra sure that you're cutting on the grain line completely straight so that your plaid is straight. And last I'm cutting 4 pockets, 2 for the left side and 2 for the right side. Our pieces are cut out. It's time to start sewing, but first we need to come up with a little plan of attack. Since this isn't a store-bought pattern, we don't have instructions. So we need to figure out the order that we're gonna sew everything. So let me think. Let me just think. Typically I would start sewing the side seams and the inseams first, but we need to add the pockets. So the first step, we're gonna add the pockets, and then we can put the pant legs together, front and back, and sew it down the side seam and along the inseam. And then we'll connect the right leg to the left leg at the little crotch seam. I hate that word. And then once that's together, we can measure the circumference of the waist so that we can make a waistband. Oh, woo! I'm glad we talked about this. We also have to leave a little gap for the zipper. I'm doing the zipper on the back side of the pants. So when we go to sew that crotch seam, when we sew that crotch seam, why do I keep saying it? It's gonna be like a U shape, so we're gonna sew the front, the center front, all the way back. And then when we get to the back of the pants, we need to leave like probably about that big of a gap, so that we can attach our zipper, and then we'll cut the waistband. We'll sew that waistband on, and then we'll attach the zipper, and then hem the bottom of the pants. Nice. High five for me. Okay, let's just start. Okay, the first thing I like to do is make a little mark on what is the right side and what is the wrong side of my fabric. Since this fabric looks the same on the wrong and the right side, I'm just gonna make a little X on the wrong side just so I can keep track. And before we start, I would highly recommend serging or zigzagging or finishing the side seam and the inseam of these pants, as well as the entire circumference of each of the pocket pieces. This will make the process so much easier. I'm gonna start by marking where I wanna place the pockets, about 1 inch down, and that is where I'm gonna attach my pockets. Right sides together and pin it down. Now I'll take my back pants piece, measure down 1 inch, place my pocket right sides together. I'm gonna do that that to my next pants piece. And now we're just gonna sew right along those pinned edges. I'm sewing everything at 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm just sewing that pocket on. And this is when I realized that I wished I would have serged my pocket before I attached it, because now it was too late. So learn from my mistake here. Next, I'm gonna fold this pocket out and press that seam nice and flat. And now I'm gonna go the extra mile and just sew a little seam right here on the seam allowance. And this just helps the pocket lay a bit nicer. Okay, now that all the pockets are attached, I'm gonna take the right leg front and the right leg back, and I'm gonna put them right sides together. And I'm gonna pin down the side seam, all around the pocket and down the rest of the side seam. And I'm also pinning them at the inseam. And now I'm gonna take it to my sewing machine and sew down the side seam, around the pocket, down the rest of the side seam. And now I'm gonna sew the inseam. And I'm gonna do the same exact thing for the left leg. Good morning. My 2 pant legs are done. Last night I got a little bit excited. I just wanted to see if they would fit and also get the placement for the darts. So I connected my 2 legs together with just a basting stitch. A basting stitch is a great stitch if you want to like temporarily sew something together just so you can try it on and make sure it fits. I basted the little crotch seam. Okay, that's the last time I'm saying it. And the pants did fit. And this also gave me an idea of where I could put the waist darts. So I just pinched the fabric and figured out where I wanted to place those. And then I seam ripped what I had just basted. And also when I tried my pants on, I realized that with the waistband, it was gonna be a little bit too tall, like hitting just above my belly button, which was a little bit too high for me. So I shaved off like 1/4 of an inch off of the top just to give myself a little bit more room. I had to be careful because the pocket is like so close to this top edge, so I really couldn't shave off any more. But ideally, I probably would have shaved off like 1 inch. So mental note, I'm making my pattern a little bit shorter next time. Okay, now it's time to add our darts. So for the front side of the pants, I'm just gonna take that 1/2 measurement, and that is where I'm gonna place the dart right there in the middle. So I'm just drawing a line 4, maybe 5 inches long, and I'm gonna pinch that dart and pin it. And this creates a little dart. Easy as that. And on the back side of my pants, instead of doing it directly in the middle, I'm doing it about 5 inches in. So again, I'm drawing my line for the dart. I'm gonna pinch it and pin it. And now we're just gonna sew along those pinned edges, tapering it in as we go. This makes the perfect dart. Once you get to the end, you're just gonna kind of taper off, nice and easy. Okay, next step, I want to finish my raw edges before connecting the pant leg, so I'm just going to use my serger, and I'm going to go down one side of the pant leg around the pocket and then down the inseam. And I'm gonna do this on both pant legs. And then we can attach the pant legs together. Before I serge, I always like to clip into my seam allowance a little right here at the corner of the pockets, just the seam allowance. This helps if you're serging to be able to kind of stretch the fabric into a straight line. This is really hard to explain, but see how I'm pulling it and making a straight line as I'm serging? Clipping that corner helps it be able to move a bit so you can make it nice and straight as you feed it through. Okay, so I'm serging that side seam and the inseam. And now it's time to figure out how big of a gap we need to leave for the zipper. I typically hate zippers, so this is me actually genuinely nervous. I'm gonna flip one of the pant legs right side out and place it inside of the inside out leg. Basically, you want these legs to be right sides together. So I'm making sure my pants are right sides together. I would recommend serging or zigzagging these little U-shaped edges before sewing them up. And I'm gonna start pinning. So I'm making sure that the inseams are matched up, and I'm gonna pin all around that little U shape. This is gonna be our crotch seam eventually, but we need to add the zipper. So I don't wanna sew all the way up the top. I'm leaving a little bit more room at the top here because I'm gonna add a waistband as well. And I'm just gonna kind of estimate roughly where I want this zipper to end, which is about 6 inches in. I'm gonna put a pin there for reference, and we're gonna make sure to leave that part open. So I'm gonna sew up that whole U-shaped crotch seam, leaving that gap open. And next, since this is a curve, it always helps to clip your curve a little bit. So I am just clipping some little triangles into my seam allowance. This just gives the crotch seam a little bit of movement. Again, this is me realizing I should have serged this before I sewed it, because then I took it to my serger and had a really hard time serging this after sewing this. This is like really painful for me to watch. So again, learn from my mistake, serge this before you sew it. But wow, these pants are really coming together. I'm trying them on again because this is the last time we have to make any adjustments before we add the waistband and the zipper. So make sure you like the fit of everything. And now we're gonna measure for the waistband. So I'm taking the circumference of this whole waist piece. This is how long we need to make the waistband. Mine is 33 inches. I'm gonna measure again. Always measure twice, cut once. And for the width of the waistband, I want it to be 1.5 inches wide. So I'm gonna double that measurement, 3 inches, and then add an inch for seam allowance. And that is the width of our waistband. And my fabric is folded in half, so we only need to draw half of the waistband. So I'm making this waistband piece 16.5 inches long and 4 inches wide. And now once we cut it, we're gonna have this long 33-inch waistband. Now it's time to prep this waistband. So I'm folding each edge in by 1/2 inch towards the wrong side, and then I'm folding the whole waistband in half. Now I'm gonna open this piece up that I just folded, and this little crease is gonna be our guide for when we sew it on. So I'm just gonna pin it right sides together to my pants, pinning the waistband all around. And I'm gonna sew right in that crease. That will be our 1/2 inch seam allowance. And I'm gonna sew it all around the pants. It's looking great. And if you wanna go the extra mile, I would trim this seam allowance in half or serge that edge just to get rid of some of that bulky fabric. Because when we fold this waistband down, eventually we're gonna want the least amount of bulk. Okay, let's add our zipper. Oof, I'm nervous. The way I made this waistband is to fold down in half, and that is where the zipper will start. Right there at that fold. So I'm gonna lay my zipper down and figure out that end point for my zipper. And I'm gonna mark that point on my pants. I'm gonna put some pins there as well to make it a little bit easier to see. And then I'm gonna mark that same end point on my zipper because, you guessed it, we're shortening the zipper. This is not necessary. You could just buy a shorter zipper, but mine was 9 inches. So I'm gonna shorten it by sewing a seam back and forth a bunch of times. This creates a little stopper. So look at that, it stops. And now I'm gonna cut off that excess zipper, cut that little baby off. And now we have our shortened zipper. So I'm gonna double check that my end spot is where those little pins are. And now if you can tell, there's like 1 or 2 inches right there of an opening that we need to close up before adding the zipper. So I'm gonna go ahead and close that opening now. And real quick, I'm going the extra mile. I'm sewing a little seam right here on the waistband just for looks. This step is also not necessary. Okay, it's zipper time. Guys, let's take some deep breaths and mentally prepare ourselves. We're gonna open the zipper and I'm gonna lay it onto the fabric, but we wanna flip it so it's right sides together. So I'm flipping the zipper to where it's right sides together onto my pants and I will pin it down. I'm gonna take that other side and fold it right sides together. And this always feels a bit weird, like you're twisting the zipper, but it does work. I'm gonna double check that my waistband is matching up. And now we can start sewing it. So I'm taking my little zipper foot, and this thing is great because you can line that little left notch up when you sew the left side of the zipper and the right notch up when you sew the right side of the zipper. And since this is an invisible zipper, the trick is you want to sew it actually really, really close to those zipper teeth. So I actually fold those teeth down as I sew. As you can see with my left hand, I'm kind of pulling the zipper teeth out and sewing really, really close to the zipper teeth. And once I get close to the end of the zipper and I start to get stressed out, that's when I stop. I'll move the foot over to the other side so I can sew the other side of the zipper teeth the exact same way. I'm going to stop when I get close to the end of the zipper. And look at that, it's beautiful. And with this little tabby thing, I'm just going to fold this in to the inside of the fabric, pop that in there. And now we need to close up that tiny little opening. So going back to the inside of the pants, I'm just gonna sew this little gap, as you can see here. We just need to sew this little opening just there on the seam allowance. So I'm just gonna sew that seam allowance right there on the zipper on both sides. I'm gonna mark the start and the end point so that I can easily see it. And I'm just gonna sew that little tiny opening right there in the seam allowance. This is super, super easy. And it looks great. That little hole is closed up. Our zipper is looking great. Now all we have to do is finish the waistband. So I'm folding this little tabby down. Now this is gonna seem crazy. I'm folding that down and now I'm folding the waistband down right sides together. I'm gonna put a pin there So I'm gonna sew that little edge so that when I pop the waistband out, look at this, wow. The waistband is finished and the zipper still pokes through. So let's go ahead and sew that pinned edge. And I'm sewing right to the right of that original zipper seam that I sewed. I'm gonna pop that out and look at that. I'm always amazed by this. But this is when I realized I should have folded that raw edge down. So again, learn from my mistake. I should have folded that raw edge in when I sewed that, but you know, you live and you learn. So to finish this waistband, I'm just gonna fold that little edge is gonna bother me so much, but I'm just gonna fold this waistband down so that it covers all of my raw edges and my seams. I'm gonna pin it all around on the inside, and I'm doing now what's called stitch in the ditch. So now I'm taking more pins on the outside of the fabric. I'm gonna pin the ditch. This is gonna make sense in a second. I'm taking the pins out on the inside of the fabric so that I only have pins on the outside. And I'm gonna sew right here in this little ditch. I'm sewing this in the ditch because it's now a hidden seam on the outside of the fabric. As you can see, it's hidden. And on the inside of the fabric, it looks great. And now our waistband is connected. Something very, very, very bad just happened. Oh my God. I can't make this up. I was on my last step. I was serging the little ankle, and then I got done serging and I was like, you know what, let me go the extra mile so this little tiny, tiny piece doesn't fray. I'm gonna squeeze some fray check on this little tiny piece. So I opened my fray check bottle. I started to squeeze it and I was like, why is it's not coming out? So I was squeezing it a little harder. My fault. And the lid popped off. The fray check exploded all over this pant leg, all in my hair after I had just washed my hair. It went on my pants, it went on my shirt, it was all over me. The first priority was obviously get it off my skin. Second priority, I immediately started washing this with soap and water, like squeezing, scraping, getting the glue off so that it didn't dry like tacky. I'm gonna wait for this pant leg to dry and then I'm gonna finish hemming it. I'm literally on my last step and they're done. What a day. After that traumatic fray check experience, I did hem these pants. And if you're wondering, why did you only fold that down once? It's because I didn't leave enough room to fold it down twice, I'll admit. Somehow they still turned out. I love how they turned out. I'm really excited to tweak this pattern a little bit and make it even more perfect. I love them. So if you learned something, give this video a little like, make sure you're subscribed. Also follow me on Instagram and TikTok for more sewing content and fun. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!